turn it on. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Randwick Local Planning Panel. My name is Lindsay Fletcher, and I'm the chair for today's proceedings. With me on my left is Julie Savitt-Ward, and on my immediate right, Heather Wharton, who are both expert members of the panel. And on my far right, Mio Chow, who's the community member of the panel. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Bidjigal and Gadigal people who occupied the Sydney coast, being the traditional owners. On behalf of the Randwick Local Planning Panel, I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present and the Aboriginal people in attendance today. Prior to the commencement of the meeting, all panel members were required to sign a declaration of interest in relation to each matter on the agenda, and I can confirm that all declarations of interest have been received and no conflicts were identified. The signed declarations will be available to view through Council's website by tomorrow afternoon, but I'll ask again, just for the record, whether any panel members have any further matters to declare.
I have no further matters.
I have no conflicts.
No conflicts of interest.
And nor do I. Today we have, I think, 11 people registered to address the panel, including the Mayor, one councillor, the Mayor. The registered speakers for each item will be heard in the following order. Firstly, councillors. Secondly, objectors. And final speakers will be on behalf of the applicant. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the panel. If I consider it appropriate, an extension of 1 minute may be granted by the chair upon request. However, no further extension will be granted. The panel's been provided with copies of all of the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application, and indeed some late correspondence as well in the last few days. Therefore, there's no need for speakers to repeat all of the points made in those submissions. Speakers should focus on the key matters they wish us to understand and consider, including suggestions about how their concerns could be resolved. The applicant may wish to comment on the issues raised in the council report, provide a response to proposed conditions, and or address any issue raised by an objector or councillor. After the speaker has addressed the panel members may ask the speaker questions to clarify any matter. Only registered speakers will be allowed to speak and respond to questions from the stand. Any person using defamatory or offensive language may be asked to leave the meeting, or the meeting may be adjourned. As I indicated earlier, an audio recording is being made of this meeting, and we ask that speakers use the microphone on the stand when addressing the panel to ensure that their comments are recorded. The audio recording will be available through the council's website by tomorrow afternoon. After all registered speakers have been heard, the panel will move to another room to deliberate and vote on each matter. So the first application with registered speakers that's considered a public meeting is the application for 253 Fitzgerald Avenue, Maroubra. And the only registered speaker we have for that matter is Mr. Russell Prescott. Mr. Prescott?
I just wanted to make myself available if there are any further issues arising the panel may wish to put to me. We're obviously in support of the recommendation of the council, and I believe we've in particular addressed the issues raised previously by the DRP in some detail in the proposal that's been developed, and the and those issues have been itemised in some detail in our letter back to the panel, which I believe has successfully sort of addressed, responded to all of the issues raised in design, amenity and compliance. So if there's anything further that you want me to elucidate on, I'll be brief and leave it there.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from panel members?
I just have one question, if I may.
Yes.
In the back, when you're facing the property in the back right corner, which I believe is the southwest corner, there's a reasonably tall shrub tree or small tree with yellow foliage very close to the back boundary. And when I look at your landscape plan, that would indicate to me you probably propose to remove that tree and replace it with it's a Chinese elm. I'm just wondering why you chose a Chinese elm. What are the benefits of that tree, given that it's not a native tree, and why there is a need to remove the other plant, given it has quite a lot of screening ability between you and the back property.
The tree was chosen by the landscape architect,
Yep.
and I sort of understand he was looking for an ornamental quality perhaps there.
Right.
If there's, the key tree that I'd been focused on was a tree on the eastern corner, which in fact in the neighbour's property.
Yes, I understand about
we
that one.
addressed, made certain we had sufficient clearances and things on that tree. From this tree, if it can be retained, I don't think it's of a size according to what I've got here that it couldn't be, so I don't have an issue with just simply leaving it there.
Okay, so you don't have...
I'm driven by the landscape architect
okay.
and the others, but I don't have any objection to retaining it. And I think, looking at this, that it could be retained.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I have no additional questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Prescott. The second item on our agenda is 40 Melrose Parade, Clove Valley. There are 3 people registered to speak on that item, the first being the Mayor, Councillor Cathy Nielsen. Welcome, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the panel. I just want to say that I support the recommendation with the amendments that have been made. I think the key issue which was identified was the uppermost roof and habitable roof space. And I don't think that the roof integrates well with the design of the building. I agree with those statements, and will not protect and enhance the natural and visual environmental qualities of the scenic area as part of the foreshore scenic protection area. I won't go on except to say that I think it's very important that that 4th story be deleted for all the points that have been made in the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker is Mr Stephen Anderson, who's objecting to the development.
Thank you, Chair. Can we blow that up?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. My main point is about the basement and the garage and the excavation associated with it. My family and I bought a unit in 42 Melrose Parade on the eastern side of the proposed development in 1999, and between exchange and settlement we noticed there was a large number of cracks appearing in the masonry throughout the building of 42, and this was occasioned, and I have the evidence of 3 consulting engineers that this was caused by the excavation next door in the Sunrise Apartments in 44. So I suppose I'm very concerned about the level of excavation, and the fact also, as I understand it, that the initial retaining wall collapsed because it didn't get down to bedrock. This is between 44 and 42 in 1999. So it had to be redone with anchor pins going into rock at some distance below the initial excavation. So when they say that it's going to be going down 2 metres, I suspect that it may have to go down considerably more into what I regard as an unstable sandy slope, and quite a steep slope. So I think that there are major concerns, and in the article that I've dug up from the Eastern Suburbs Messenger in year 2000, it goes into it in more detail than I can do in the 3 minutes here. So that's my first and major point. The second point is the concerns that I've other concerns I've had. What's happening here? Sorry. It's stuck.
That's the pointer. That's what that was. Yeah. Just go this way.
It's not happening. I'll just try it here. There we are. The lessons need to be learned from the Melrose Parade development. The side gradient is almost 1 in 10. The size of the car park is overlooking the reviewing officer's comments on page 117. Foundations of the retaining wall need to be down to bedrock, and there will almost certainly be need for a deeper excavation than stated. And there's another point about whether there does need to be a retaining wall on the eastern side. There are other concerns which have been passed on by other occupants of Melrose Parade. They're concerned about machinery, ventilation stacks, exhaust ducts and air conditioning, loss of amenity, noise, view and privacy, and privacy concerns, which my next speaker I think will follow, he will address. And in summary, there's need for increased scrutiny of developments by councils in view of the shoddy work in recent well-publicised unit developments elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from members of the panel?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker I have on that is also an objector, Mr. Julian Abelson.
Mine's just the one screen, so I'll go with the other one. Just change the slide. Thank you, Steve.
This one, yes.
All right, mine's just the one slide. Look, it's a fairly minor concern, I guess, in the overall development application, but it makes a big difference to us is our privacy concerns. That's the vision from the rear of our place, and that'll then be a 3-storey development, and all of those balconies are going to look out straight through into our living space. So we would greatly appreciate further privacy provisions. A suggestion was frosted glass on any balconies, or if they were opaque, then that wouldn't be an issue. And preferably some extra foliage at the back, some mature age trees, or privacy screens would be greatly appreciated. We are quite concerned that they will be staring straight, all apartments will be staring straight into our living area and kitchen. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Sorry, just before you leave.
Sorry.
Sorry, can I just be clear? You said this is the view from your property.
Yes.
If there was frosted, you're saying a frosted balustrade, you'd be happy with that on their balcony?
I think that would solve on their balconies,
Yeah.
on the 3 balconies. I think that would really solve it. I think at the moment, if there's glass there, they're going to be in their living space, looking straight down on ours from.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to
Okay,
be looking
thank
straight
you.
across. Thank you.
Can I just clarify as well? So you're on the ground floor.
I'm actually on the. We're a 2-storey, 2-floor building. I'm on the top floor.
Oh, okay. So you're on the top floor. I noticed because we were out on site this morning.
Sure.
I noticed that your ground level is lower than the site's ground level.
Yeah, significantly
and
lower.
therefore that makes your fence look short from the proposed development side.
Yes, sure.
And I did at the time, noting the bamboo that is on your side, and I know that, well, it's thickish halfway up and then it's quite spindly further up. Is the height of the existing fence an issue? Would that assist if it was higher?
It certainly would. A couple of years ago, during one of the big storms, the fence came down with all the trees that were on the other side of it.
On their side?
On their side.
Yes.
With great, because they were selling to the new purchaser, Mr. Lamb, they were very reluctant to put any sort of cost into the new fencing, so we got a minimal fence, and we've been doing our best to build up the foliage, which is that bamboo,
Yep.
on our side, but we would certainly appreciate a higher fencing or as I said, mature age trees or something on the other side that would provide a bit more protection.
Thank you.
Can I pursue that a little further? You said you're on the upper level,
Yes.
but is there only a single level at the rear? There's two levels at the front, or are you on the ground level effectively?
So from the front, there's, I'm not on the ground floor, no, sorry, there's stairs at the back which go down
Right.
to the other apartments. So there's four
Okay.
apartments at the back.
At the back.
From the front, because of the slope of the land, the front, there's entrance to the two bottom apartments. You go round the side of the building and then go up
Okay.
to our ones, if that makes sense.
Okay. So there's the recommendation before the panel is to delete the upper floor.
Yes.
But, so dealing with the other three levels, if the fence at the ground level were of such a height that it ensured you privacy, would deal with that one. So your concern about overlooking from balconies and the suggestion for opaque treatment or of frosted glass would apply to the upper two balconies.
It would certainly apply. If you can see there, I'm not quite sure whether the level of the ground one will be, but I assume about the level of where the current sort of exit is.
It's
and
about
then the next
level
two.
of the pool.
Sorry?
It's about the level
About the level of the pool, yeah. Those next two levels will look directly into our place. Even with a higher fencing,
A
they
higher
are going
fence would probably protect you from the
from
ground
the
floor
lower
apartment.
ground floor,
Yeah.
yeah, but the top two would certainly look over. We do greatly appreciate the removal of the fourth floor, obviously.
Sure. Support that. Thank you. No
Okay.
further questions?
May I ask, are you the only one that are facing the other side from
No,
your
there's
building?
two of us. We all face out that way. There's two on. There's my one. There's one to the west side, which would be to the right of the photo there, the right of the right photo, and then there's two below in corresponding positions below. In terms of the privacy, mine and my level is most affected.
Right.
But everyone in our apartment block had objected through one of the objection proposals, and they asked me to speak on behalf of the privacy
Okay.
for all of us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelson.
Right, thank you.
Then the next item on our agenda is 20 Dundas Street in Coogee.
So can I confirm the applicant is not here? Is that correct?
Sorry, the applicant is not here
For Melrose.
for Melrose Parade. Or not registered to speak.
They're not here. Can we just check they're not here? Okay. Wow.
Sorry.
Additional speaker that hasn't registered.
It's the same points as Steve made, but just wanted to give more colour to that, if that's okay. Additional speaker objecting?
Yes, objecting, is it?
Objecting, you're not the applicant. Not the applicant.
We'll give you 2 minutes, not 3.
I would have to get your name first and everything just to put it on record. Just 1 second.
Which is very good. Can you start by giving us your name and your
Yes, sir.
address?
Um, I live in Steve's building. I'm the owner
Same
of
building.
one of the apartments. I moved
And
there
your
with
name
my-
is?
Sorry?
Your name is?
Eugene
Eugene.
Christenko.
Thank you.
So me and my wife bought that place 6 years ago. We're trying to raise a family there, 2 girls, 10 and 8. They go to Clavelli Public School. There are 2 things. First of all, the basement. That's a real serious concern for me.
That was raised by one of the earlier speakers, yes?
That's right. I work for land lease and in the legal department, and I deal with the bad things, and I see a lot of issues created by people digging. And as you know, Melrose Parade, it just slopes downwards.
Yes.
The second point is about air conditioners. I think there was a suggestion to address that sort of as part of, air conditioners need to be quiet and all that sort of thing. But I think if it can be addressed as part of conditions that, about where the air conditioners go, because obviously you have a building, there are huge balconies, there is now going to be a rooftop up there. If all of that machinery can be moved out of the way, because what I find with the current house that's there is you've got air conditioning right across my younger daughter's bedroom. And so what that means is that in summer, when the neighbors switch on the aircon, right, during the night, I can't open the windows because my girl can't go to sleep.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions?
No.
Okay, so moving to 20 Dundas Street, the only person registered is Mr. Adam Colbert, who represents the applicant. Mr. Colbert?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, panel members. Adam Colbert on behalf of the applicant. We note Council's recommendation and have no objection to the draft conditions of consent. As noted in Council's assessment report, a similar proposal was previously refused by Council, and this was primarily due to concerns about poor residential amenity in the dwelling. We've worked with Council and implemented design changes that ensure the proposal improves amenity for the occupants, providing a high level and ensuring that neighbouring properties are not adversely impacted. I'm confident we've addressed these concerns, and this is reflected in a positive recommendation from Council. The reason this application was referred to the panel is on account of a variation to the FSR development standard. This is appropriately justified and accepted in Council's assessment report, but in brief, it's our position that the parking that was provided in that building was surplus to the requirements. So technically, it's maintaining an existing exceedance. In any case, if that argument is not accepted, it's a technical non-compliance in the sense that there is no change to the visual bulk, loss of privacy, overshadowing, or views, given that there's no changes and the dwelling will be contained within the existing structure. I acknowledge that there has been submissions made, and one of the issues that was raised was in relation to characterisation and permissibility. In the previous application that was refused, permissibility was not in dispute, and the characterisation of this building was determined by Council as a dwelling house. Given that this is an analogous application, we'd anticipate a consistent treatment, and we accept Council's interpretation and submit that there's nothing expressed or implied in the definition that would preclude this interpretation. However, if on the other hand a different view was formed, we would suggest that ultimately be the same conclusion, as an application like this could be progressed under existing use rights provisions, and which provides for an enlargement, expansion, or intensification of an existing use. Finally, we believe the proposal provided an improved outcome for the site by converting the existing surplus parking spaces into functional accommodation with a high level of amenity, expansive coastal views, dedicated car parking, and well-connected private open space. The alternative would be to require that the area is reinstated as parking, which would perpetuate surplus parking that is disconnected from the primary residential accommodation and has awkward access and doesn't comply with the relevant Australian standard. The proposal is consistent with the objectives of the zone and will provide housing diversity and affordable rentable accommodation in a well-serviced locality challenged by housing affordability. Thank you. I'm available for any questions the panel may have.
Panel members, questions?
I just want to understand what was changed in this application. What amenity improvements did you make to made to the dwelling, or are proposed?
Yeah. So I guess one of the concerns was in relation to, we can have a look at the reasons for refusal of the previous application, but there was concerns about internal amenity in terms of overlooking, and we put a planter box on the above it to prevent views from the existing that hard stand area above the dwelling down into the private open space. We separated the car parking space out to provide some separation between the car parking space and the private open space, and we incorporated, or the proposal is to incorporate a another window in the northern elevation, which will improve cross ventilation. There's also some minor internal reconfigurations.
Right, so the planter box is proposed as part of this DA, because when we went there today, there was just like a complete concrete,
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
So there is a landscape plan that forms part of your part of the proposal, and which will be incorporated into the development consent if it was to be issued.
and the treatment of that courtyard, is that it's showing like a different colour on the drawings, is that going to be like, made into a deck, or is it still going to be the same concrete?
For the purpose of this application, the building designer who's not here today left that open as concrete, but it would be anticipated that that could be improved, I guess, through as exempt development. If they were to lay, AstroTurf or something like that, which is whatever is popular these days as a flooring cover.
Right.
Yeah.
I just had another question about the clause 4.6 submission,
Yeah.
which seems to say we don't really think we need a clause 4.6 submission, but if we do, this is why we say it's okay. Is that it seems to want to have a bet both ways?
Oh, well, that was a suggestion. I guess the background to it is that this application was initially, it was refused, and then there was a response to that refusal, and it was initially intended to progress it as a review application. However, council indicated to us that they wouldn't have time to assess it and determine it within the statutory period, so they directed us to make a new application. Look, and in that previous application, the direction from council was that, actually it went to a council meeting, as I understand, and then it was sent back for a request for a 4.6 variation on account of the FSR. We've always sort of suggested that there is technically no exceedance. However, in any case, we think it stands up on merit and satisfies the relevant test to satisfy 4.6.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. I just have a bit of a problem that you can't really say in your clause 4.6 submission that we don't really need a clause 4.6 submission. You know what I mean?
Well, I think we've made it out that 4.6 and addressed all the requirements, and we have done that to considerable detail. That was an appendix to the Statement of Environmental Effects.
Yeah, we've got it in the
Yeah.
report. Okay.
However, I guess we're just making the note, but I believe that we have satisfied those matters under 4.6.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I have one additional question, Mr. Colbert. In your clause 4.6, you make the point that the parking was surplus under the original approval,
Yeah.
and therefore that would have been counted as GFA. Therefore, you're not increasing GFA in this case.
Yeah.
Do you have evidence or data or something that shows that it was actually counted as GFA, or is it just a principle you're using?
Look, it's largely a principle, but I guess it's based on two things, and one is that parking down in the front of the site there didn't exist until until after 2004 when it was approved. So that was a subsequent approval, and at which point the residential accommodation higher up on site was prohibited and already had its existing use rights. So that was put in as surplus and additional parking at a later date. So it can't be seen to be required for that. That was sort of the point we're making. Additionally, we also suggest that under the current standards, with the dwelling mix up on the site, that meets the current standards with the tandem garage and the two other single garages on the site. So in any case, I think it can be made out.
Okay. And the additional question is, this is actually increasing density of use, i.e. the garages are having people live in them, so the development as such is increasing density. So therefore one can argue it is increase in GFA. What do you consider? What do you say to that?
Well, I guess we would suggest that in terms of the density control, that was, I guess, the argument that we're making, that was already counted, that floor space, because it was surplus parking, so it goes towards the floor space ratio, and the floor space ratio exceedance doesn't change. But in any case, the alternative argument, if that is not accepted, we just tried to cover the field here. In any case, we think it should be supported because There is just no adverse impacts resulting from it. It is contained within a building. The setback of that building aligns with the streetscape. It almost seems like an intended consequence of that site. There's no discernible privacy impacts. Because of its orientation, there's no overshadowing whatsoever. There's no view impacts. Nothing's changing. So on that case, we suggested it's a technical non-compliance.
Thank you.
Certainly, yes.
Hi, I would like to know whether this garage has ever been used as garages after you've built it?
Look, I don't know that. I understand that it was.
Right. So it was originally built
It was
to
built and
be a
received
triple
a
garage?
construction certificate and occupation certificate, and was built as a garage at some point.
Right.
At some point, I understand that it was converted illegally, and council has taken actions, and I understand that the owner received some penalty notices, but I don't see that that's terribly relevant to the consideration of the current
No, I just want to
proposal.
understand, because you talk about surplus garages. So
Oh,
what's
right, yeah.
why originally built surplus ones when they were never really needed?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So I don't understand
sorry,
that,
I
that's
can't
why.
comment on that. Yeah,
Right, okay, thank you.
yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I've got two questions, if I may. First is the relationship between the outdoor private open space, the courtyard, and the living areas of this apartment is less than ideal. It effectively opens off the bedroom rather than the living areas. Have you considered mirror reversing that so that the living area was to the north, bedroom
Yeah.
to the south?
I guess the preference is to maintain it the same way it is. I feel that being
Because it's already built.
that's right. Yeah, you know. Look, if the panel had a different view, then it may be able to be. I'm sure that would be something that could be considered. I'm not quite sure from. I don't have the building designer here who would may be able to comment on that. I guess that design was designed that way, and I sort of felt that, given that it is still very closely connected, we are talking about, it's intended that this will be, I guess, affordable accommodation, rental accommodation. There's no ability to subdivide this off or anything like that, and it's sort of very self-contained in that lower part of the site with your parking space, private open space, and a single bedroom and facilities. It's not going to be a large dwelling with a large family. You'd expect that there's 1 or 2 occupants maximum.
Is it I've now got 3 questions, but is it proposed to actually treat that car space in a way that could be a dual-use space?
On the
Leave
current
it as bare
landscape plan,
concrete?
it's not. No,
No, it's not.
no. But once again, something like that could be considered. Yeah.
Okay, my final question is, I understand the estimated cost of the works that's included in the application was, I think, $30,000, $30,000 to $40,000.
Yeah.
Is that the cost of the works proposed under this application, or is that the total cost of conversion of the garages?
The total cost of conversion of the garages, including the proposed works.
All the sewage work, all of the plumbing, the fit out of the kitchen, the fit out of the thing, $30,000.
That's what I was advised. Yep.
Did you get quantity surveyors?
The building
Report on that?
designer provided those figures.
Estimates? Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is 46 Dutrick Street in Randwick. We have a councillor, again, Councillor Kathy Nielsen, the Mayor, to speak to us on that. We have one objector, and then we have a panel representing the applicant.
Thank you, Chair and panel. I'm again supporting the recommendation from the panel. I mean, personally, I'd rather not see the place demolished, but the recommendation is that the top level be deleted. And I agree with the summary in the executive summary, the fact that the key issues associated with the proposal relate to compatibility with the character of the area, heritage conservation and wall height. The overarching concern is related to the bulk and scale of the development within the heritage conservation area, and the uppermost level that wholly contains the proposed Unit 4. This level results in an unacceptable impact upon the upon the heritage conservation area, and also results in a variation to the wall height control. So basically, I'm hoping that if you are of a mind to approve this development, and I'm sure the other objector will elaborate on more of the other points, but I certainly would be encouraging you to refuse the upper level. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any questions?
No.
No, thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Andrew Scott, who's an objector.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Andrew Scott and I reside in number 48 Dutrick Street, Randwick, located on the southern side of number 46. Since the original DA for number 46 back in January 2018, there have been some minor amendments which we do applaud. However, sadly, these wholesale changes are not enough to rest our concerns. This project remains unacceptable. We do still vigorously object to this DA on the basis that it has unacceptable impacts on our asset and neighbouring properties, and that it fails to neither meet nor provide for an appropriate, equitable planning outcome. With the affordable housing component, this incipiently resulted from the original DA being refused on the basis of effectively the land not being large enough for the proposed development. To me, this seems to be seen as exploiting an alternative loophole circumventing the Planning Act. Predominantly, it's a gross overbuild in height. Thank you, Councillor, for supporting that. And the setback, considering the size of the land, negatively affecting ours and other neighbouring properties by reduced solar light with 7 skylights along with grass front and rear yard. Both will seriously be affected with little or no light, especially at particular times of the year, winter being the worst. A physical inspection of the DA site and neighbouring properties is imperative in comprehending the scale of the development and its impacts. The proposed setback in line with 44 Dutrick Street, a block of apartments on effectively twice the size block of number 46, is not a comparable, and neither are any of the other examples given similar to the size of land and build. The excavation component of the DA, the report referring to this as being a problem site, i.e. risky, the proposed parking basement level and the very close proximity to our over 100-year-old terrace has obvious problems alarming us, being direct damage to our property along with drainage, water, rising damp issues and foundation problems. With the recent fiascos of the Mascot and Opal Towers, we have no alternative except to officially put on notice the developers and any associated parties of their liability on both an emotional and financial cost damage basis. This area of Randwick is a heritage conservation area. The development does nothing to complement the current streetscape as confirmed by a heritage officer. You certainly do not wish to set a precedent with these types of builds being a gross overbuild purely based on a monetary outcome. Further negative issues are parking, health and safety, turning Wood Lane into a thoroughfare, stormwater issues, loss of privacy, vegetation, along with ventilation detriments. Randwick Council has received over 16 unique objections against this development. Surely the council, with its code of conduct and ethics, should always be and act in the best interests of their constituency, being ratepayers. It seems clear to me the only people in favour of this development are the developers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Before I call for questions, can I just assure you that we have actually been out to the site and had a good look around, so we understand those circumstances. But yes, panel members, any questions?
I do have one question. So the recommendation in front of us is to remove the top story of the proposal. Does that make any difference to you and the comments you've just put to us?
It may do, but we noticed in the documentation that they, or you've suggested to raise the ceiling height of each apartment. We'd like to know exactly by how much and exactly how high the development would be. But it certainly goes in favour of what I said, that there have been amendments that we do applaud, you know, and we thank them. But yeah, we'd want to know exactly how high it is and how high the ceiling height's going to be,
Thank you.
if we may.
Thank you. Any
Yeah.
further questions?
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you, Mr. Scott.
Yes.
We now have three representatives for the applicant to respond. Anthony Betros, James Phillips, and the architect, Alexander Jelsic, is it?
Yeah, unfortunately, Anthony Betros won't be able to attend.
That's fine. I'm sure you can speak on his behalf, so
Sure.
please come forward. The architect's here, so.
My name is Alexander Jelicic. I'm the architect for this project, and with me is Mr. James Phillips. We're both here to obviously discuss the item, particularly to do with our DA condition that was proposed by the council staff to remove the top level.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if it's more efficient if we both present at the same time, or do you want us to present one after the other?
In your hands, you can have 6 minutes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll maybe just start off first with just a generic outline of the proposal. Now, I've submitted also, as part of our submission, we've submitted the letter, which kind of
Yes.
talks about opposition to the particular condition and why
Yes.
we believe that's unacceptable.
We have a copy.
So I guess since the original DA was lodged, 2018, we have been obviously in front of the design review panel. I should call it design excellence panel. The panel has obviously reviewed the proposal, made some recommendation mostly to do with communal open space which is positioned to the rear lane, as well as some minor setbacks to the upper level on the northern side of the proposal. Now, the panel members, obviously, the Design Excellence panel members, they're obviously a group of architects, urban designers. They're very much aware that this is a conservation area. They're very much aware of certain limitations that this site has. And subject to those changes, that we're in full support of this proposal. We have made some of those changes, and as a result, the proposal did not have to go back. In addition to that, during the assessment by council staff, we were given some preliminary comments, and some of those comments were related to the heritage component as well. In that particular letter, which is also flagged, a paragraph was flagged in our submission, it talks about some additional setbacks to be introduced to the top two levels, level 2 and level 3. Now, all those changes were implemented and provided to the council, and during the, I guess, final stages of the assessment, we wouldn't really told at any point until we saw the report last week that recommendation for the whole level to be removed. We were under the impression that what we provided was satisfactory. Our original heritage consultant, Zoltan Kovac, who we worked with from day one whilst we were preparing this proposal, rather than just obviously giving them proposal to analyse at the end of the process, was in full support of the original scheme as well as the amendment. Unfortunately, Zoltan's overseas, wasn't able to attend today. As a result, we felt maybe getting a peer review would be also a very helpful thing, hence why Mr. James Phillips is here with us as well. There were a few comments made previously by the objectors. I do disagree with some of them, because even the council's report clearly states that the proposal in a current form, being four stories, does not have adverse impact in relationship to the overshadowing.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It's 3 minutes.
In relationship to the overshadowing, the view loss as such, and the scheme does comply with the height as it is now with the 4 levels proposal. Also complies with all the relevant items such as the landscaping and all the major controls from a council's point of view, such as density as well. So I guess that's from my end, just in relationship to that. Again, we have provided a number of diagrams, and we've done extensive analysis of the street because we understood how important it is to actually come up with an appropriate building format. I'm just trying to maybe take you to quickly, and this is again information that was provided to you already.
Yes.
But this is, I think, just a simple diagram that talks about what we are obviously seeking today and the outcome of the proposal that is recommended by council staff to remove the top story. I think it's also important to say, whilst, yes, this is obviously a part of the conservation area, we do have row of terraces to our south. Hypothetically, there's always an opportunity, subject to obviously council approval, for the properties to our south to end up being somewhat higher, perhaps in the future. So it's not, but we still believe that even at the current height, that our proposal fits this particular streetscape. Maybe I'll pass on to
Mr. Phillips.
Ms. Phillips.
Well, having come late to this project, I concur with Mr. Kovacs, my fellow heritage consultant, on the basis that the additional story, it's delineated from the 3 stories that sit directly beside the contributory item to the conservation area. And I believe that in the current form, with the top floor set back, it provides a good transition between the large residential flat buildings that dominate the rest of the street as you go up the hill. The other aspect of it is that the 2 terraces that form a group, in being a pair, form quite a robust building group beside the residential flat building, and therefore the residential flat building that's proposed is not going to overwhelm them as 2 items contributing to the conservation area. And I believe the view towards the conservation area goes further down the hill towards the corner. So I think this is a very satisfactory resolution of infilling beside a terrace house and beside a set of residential flat buildings.
Thank you. One question firstly, Mr. Phillips. How long have you been involved? When were you asked to undertake a review?
Just in the last month.
Very shortly. Thank you. Panel members, any questions?
I've just got a question about this elevation. The RL of the actual units on the right-hand side is 79.89 at the gutter, and the roof form of that residential building is like a hip roof and it's quite recessive. You can see it in the council officer's report on page 252. So does it really step down the hill? Because if you look at the RL of that flat building next door and then you look at yours is higher than what you perceive as the street wall of that building, even though the site slopes downwards.
So obviously so the top of our parapet for the top level is pretty much in line with the gutter line of the residential flat building next door. So you're right, obviously the ridge is higher than our building, but also it's a hip roof, so the ridge is obviously further back. But the idea was to obviously align, and I think we do have, I think we had, this is, if I can use the mouse, the idea was to align, obviously our parapet with that gutter line of the residential flat building. And one of the reasons why we actually stepped the facade on the top level as well as the level below is to make a transition. This was sort of in collaboration, discussions with design review panel, is to make that kind of a step effect between, because the residential flat building to our north is further forward, i.e. proud, than what the terraces are. So what we are doing in that sense is kind of creating a step or transition between, in plan, as well as the massing, between the residential flat building and our terraces to our south.
Okay, because I understand from the council's report that the transition, that's one of the problems, or the problem with the top floor is that it doesn't have a transition from the area that's not in the heritage conservation area to the terrace, and that matching it isn't a transition. That's what I understand.
One of the comments I think that were particularly flagged in the council's heritage report are these 2 columns. That's my understanding, as well as this masonry frame that's around the top. Those were the 2 elements that were flagged as being kind of, one of the issues. And then obviously, but then saying, however, we think that the whole top story should go. So again, I'm not here to sort of, trade or anything like that, but if the panel or the council believes these elements would obviously significantly improve, would be obviously happy to accept that. But what we obviously don't want to do is potentially compromise the end result.
I also want to ask about the affordable housing aspect of the development.
Yes.
Is there a community housing provider lined up that's going to look after this unit?
There are a few options. There's actually, the current proposal that's in front of me today being 4 levels. 2 apartments are,
Yep.
2 biggest apartments are to be affordable housing, and the other 2 apartments are just regular housing. But this is fundamentally a family project. It's actually to be built to keep, rent to keep. So we're talking about a long-term holdings. This is not just a situation with people. I heard some concerns from the residents about developing this and just walking away. You can't do that because obviously you're committed. We don't have as particular provider as such. Obviously, one of the reasons why this was initiated is because of the proximity to the hospital, and that's something that we'll be probably seeking to try to come up with some sort of agreement with a provider that has a links to the hospital and have that a relationship.
So have you done research that the community housing provider is interested in taking such a large unit in this location?
No, we haven't as yet. We've obviously discussed it with a few different providers, we haven't actually nominated anyone in particular, and hence we had to do some research because we didn't think it's pointless to go through this significant expense and holding costs in trying to get something approved that will not work. So we do know there is interest, and in fact, there was a particular reason for proposing those larger units because they can accommodate bigger families. I mean, there is a project that was approved up the road, number 40 Dutrick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that was also affordable housing scheme, which is actually, we've got an image of that. It's the project on top right-hand side. So this is approved, and that has 8 apartments, a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units. And from what we've been told, this was approved, I'm just guessing now, maybe about a year or 2 ago. My understanding is that the interest is more in a larger apartments. Hence why we've gone for a fewer units and obviously for bigger units, being like 1 apartment per floor. We believe they've got obviously an excellent amenity. They pretty much comply with the apartment design guide. So that's why we were, I guess, shocked or surprised to find out what the ultimate outcome is. And this is something that may not concern the panel or the council, but ultimately, when you take up 25% of the development, the whole thing just becomes compromised. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not necessarily your concern to worry about the economics behind the project, but if this doesn't get approved in its current form, I'm just suggesting that there may not be a project at all. And I don't know if that's the desired outcome, and I don't really know what's going to happen beyond that. Because there's a certain economies of scale when you start doing things like basements and what have you. You can't just sort of take up a certain percentage, which is a quarter of the project, and then end up with something that would still potentially work. And unfortunately, it's also a bit, I think, absurd to go to appeal this and then go to the whole process of Land Environment Court for trying to retain back an affordable unit, because that's what's been actually lost in this process. It's one affordable unit's been removed. So, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Yellowcheek,
Yep.
On the elevations that you showed, those ones, correct? Yes. I think council's point relates to not the streetscape as a whole,
Yes.
but the separation between regular buildings and the heritage area. So when I look at those, for example, the top elevation or profile there.
That's the street elevation. That's
the street elevation. Yeah. So the heritage component is, if you're looking at the top one, it relates to the left-hand side and the buildings there, yes. And creating a separation to the higher buildings, yeah. That are the regular non-heritage area buildings. So I think that's what council's trying to say is we need a separation in the profile of the 2 areas, not linking them together as you're suggesting.
Right. Well, again, I'm not sure whether we're talking about our heritage or whether we're talking about urban design, but when we had a discussion with the Design Excellence Panel, obviously the focus is on urban design, and I think the expertise is more in urban design than heritage. So they, from a massing point of view, they felt having obviously a proposal that we have is, I guess, appropriate, because what this does, in my opinion, and I think theirs as well, is the missing tooth effect, because you're looking at obviously the streetscape that's got a certain rhythm to it, and clearly when you look at the street like this, it kind of doesn't. I mean, all the buildings have this sort of a gradual step up towards the ridge of Dutrick Street, even the residential flat buildings which are on our right hand side. So it's got a certain logic to it. This, in my opinion, is an anomaly in the way it presents to the whole street. And again, it's you can also say, obviously, the properties to our south being in a conservation area, they're not heritage items. The only heritage item is actually the one on the corner. Yep.
As opposed to the conservation area.
Yes. So, I mean, yes, we're looking at these terraces the way they are today. I hinted earlier, like our office is in Kellett Street, Potts Point. It's in a two-story, it's in a conservation area. It's a two-story terrace, but we have been able to add extra 2 levels on top of that. So we have facade, which is 2 levels, and then we've got 3 meter setback, and then we have 2 stories on top. And that's that's a conservation area. I understand it's a different part of Sydney, but it's got a, I guess, equally important fabric, which is in that area as well.
Okay, I have a couple more questions.
Before we move on that, because you've covered it from an urban design point of view, which I appreciate, but I wonder if we could have Mr. Phillips' comments on that question.
With regard to that, I think given that the upper floor is set back, it has a much lesser impact on the streetscape. This presents one view of what's happening in the streetscape. But as I pointed out earlier, the 2 terraces are quite robust, and the building that's being proposed is quite well mannered in terms of how it sits with those terraces. And I think that within the streetscape, putting a gap in the top to provide some transition between the residential flat buildings and the older terraced houses doesn't really provide any meaningful differentiation. The differentiation is going to be seen at street level, where there's a clearly contemporary residential flat building, which is part of the character of the area, whether we like it or not, and a series of terraces that form part of the conservation area. So I don't see a huge debate in terms of ameliorating heritage impact by removing an upper story. I think it's quite a blunt instrument when we've got here, and I'm in support of a good design that sits well in the streetscape, and that becomes a more important factor in being well mannered towards a pair of terraces than whether something's sitting on top.
Thank you. Sorry.
So there's one, sorry.
I just wanted to add that council did actually make a suggestion that some form of 4th level would be acceptable. So I guess that goes kind of against the argument of having nothing there. But when this was designed as well, I mean, and I think what Mr. Phillips has said earlier, the top level has been designed so it's got a different kind of a lighter appearance. It does have a different material than what the lower levels are. So lower levels are more masonry. They've got some additional articulation. Hence why we've introduced the central columns in the middle to actually have that sort of a similar width of the rhythm of the existing terraces. And then the top level is obviously set back from north, south, east and west. It's a smaller footprint. And again, it's something that especially when you look at obviously maybe even a south elevation, you can see how the building steps from the first 2 levels, and then it goes, I think, 3.2 meters on level 3, and then level 4 has got 3.8 meter setback again.
An additional question that relates to something one of the opponents said. Relates to the recommendation, council's recommendation is to remove a level, but it's also to increase the floor to ceiling height per level. So just if you could respond to that question that the opponent mentioned, what would be the overall increase in height of the building, removing one level, but also increasing the floor to ceiling height?
So the increase will be by 300 millimetres.
Yeah, okay.
However, I don't think it's required, and if I can explain why. Okay, so the apartment design guide has a generic objective to say 3.1 meters floor to floor for all the residential flat buildings. Now, this is an extremely modest building footprint. So what we always do, and we do actually work on a larger projects, and even on a big developments with the big floor plates, the concrete slabs and structures are traditionally 200 thick. So if you have a 3 meters floor to floor, that gives you a leftover of 100 millimeters to accommodate for gyprock ceiling and floor finish, which is most commonly timber floor or tile. So we are pretty confident in such a small building footprint that even with 3 meters floor to floor, we can easily satisfy apartment design guide, because what the objective is 2.7 meter floor to ceiling. It's not necessary to achieve that. You can achieve that through less of a height than 3.1 meters, which is what we are saying. And we really wanted to make sure, we even went through the extent of specifying the appropriate lift, so the lift code does not breach the height limit as well, which is what we found, that obviously there is some that doesn't have a lift over and they will go over that height. And that was all provided to the council as well during the assessment. So we really didn't want to breach the height because we felt that just doesn't, it's not necessary, and we think we can still achieve the a very quality amenity, because obviously being a single story apartments, we have openings on 3 sides, so there's actually no need.
Thank you. I have one additional question regarding the chimney on the neighbouring building. It seems when we were there this morning, it seems actually to jut out from their building and be on your airspace, if you like. Is that correct?
No,
How are
it's not.
you accommodating?
That chimney is actually a property of 46 Dutrick.
Yes.
That's property.
I understand it's the property of the neighbour, but the
of the subject
footprint,
side.
because it doesn't have a footprint, but the air print seems to come out onto this proposed site. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
So this whole chimney is solely in the ownership of 46 Dutrick, which is the subject site.
Yes.
I believe the chimney of the 48 is shown on a plan there. You can see it on elevation. It's on the other side. Yeah, that was the confusion, I think, because when we had a survey plan done, and the way the building works, so we have obviously fireplaces abutting 48 Dutrick. So hence that's the chimney that's provided. But in any case, our building is actually set back along that southern boundary anyway, so there's no need for us to interfere with that regardless, whether it's for the structural reasons or what have you.
So just to clarify, structurally, it's not part of the adjoining property?
No.
It's not connected other than
No, we had a
abutting
detailed survey. It's solely on our property. Yeah.
And not structurally connected to the other property?
Well, I don't.
It's abutting.
Can't actually. My understanding, it's abutting. Yes, because obviously it's like any terrace common wall. You still ultimately have to have a brickwork on your side, and then obviously you've got a brick wall on the other side.
And I take it, therefore, given your answer, the proposal is in fact to demolish it because you're putting a basement under it.
At this point, yes, because that's what was always our understanding. We never thought there was no easement or anything like that flagged on a survey plan. But in any case, if for whatever reason had to remain, we don't actually require it to be removed because our building is set back. Partially, it's abutting at the front. It's abutting 48 Dutrick, and then obviously it's set back from the reach backwards.
Could you construct a basement under it?
Yes, absolutely. We have done a lot more intricate projects than that. Yeah, so that's not an issue. In regards to the basement, I understand the concerns and issues that the people have flagged. We have provided a geotech report, which actually, because we are on a reach, it flags that there's a sandstone not far from the surface of the property, which is in a way a good thing because ultimately, from a support point of view, you really only just have to saw cut the basement in relationship to excavation, so you actually don't have to do significant piling along the property or anything like that. Hence why, and this is something that was investigated before we proceeded too far ahead with this proposal. So again, I mean, traditionally, as everyone knows, from a council staff's point of view, there is obviously a detailed dilapidation report that has to be provided before anything commences anyway. So
it's fine, we understand that. I have no more questions.
I do, but it's just picking up that point because I know, and you may have not seen it, but one of the objections raised suggests that the geotechnical report identifies the site as a problem site with a reasonable chance of damage occurring to number 48 next door. I'm simply paraphrasing from what's before me.
No,
do you know that to be the case, or is it your understanding?
I don't remember seeing that. If anyone has got a copy of that to say, that's not my understanding.
Well, presumably it's in your geotechnical report.
Yes, of course. Yeah. We haven't seen that.
That's not your understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all.
No, I had no further questions. No further questions. Thank you both for your
very much.
assistance.
Thanks for your time.
No. Yes. That's the end of the items on which we have to make determinations, but we do have another matter, which is a planning proposal, and we have a speaker registered in opposition to that, as well as a speaker on behalf of the applicants. Before either of those people come forward, I just want to point out the role of this committee is not to make a decision on that. That'll be a matter for the council at a future meeting, and ultimately for the minister, potentially following a detailed public exhibition of the proposal, opportunity for comment. So please bear that in mind in your responses. We're happy to hear from you. The first speaker we have is Mr. Charles Abella. Mr. Abella?
Thank you. I'd just like to make a few comments on the heritage report. I feel it's in need of some review as to potential historic relics on the site.
We have the benefit of your
Sorry?
we have the benefit of your written submission, so we understand the point
Yes,
you're making.
I'd like to say that the written submission was based on an earlier heritage assessment.
Yep.
But a couple of days ago, I was made aware of by the council and given by the council visibility of the latest one. So that would I would ask that would be sort of set aside. I do have an updated one if you do want one, but.
No, that's fine. We're happy to hear from you.
Okay. Can I just address that picture up there? That's Bumper Point,
Yep.
looking from east to west, and that tall building there is on the top of Bumper Point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the heritage report, it describes that building to works being undertaken to produce the tunnel for water to go into the Bunurong power station, but it doesn't describe the function of that building. Now, to my mind, that looks very much like the watchtower at La Perouse, which was built in 1820 and to guard against a perceived threat by the French. It seems to have portals there for the cannons, two levels, and possibly cannons on top. And it's very, very similar to that. And I think some research needs to be done on that to really identify the precise function of the building. Now, it's not there now, but there probably still is the foundations for that, and that would be historic. The watchtower La Perouse is the oldest known standing colonial building in Australia. So if that was built in conjunction with that, there is anecdotal evidence that, in fact, the garrison was stationed at Bumper Point, and a few of the soldiers went regularly to the watchtower at La Perouse. so, but that needs to be researched.
Yes.
And to me, it also looks like there's a defensive wall running at the base of that building.
Mr. Abella, I can give you one more minute.
Sorry. That there, the round bit, I think is the base of that building, and
Yes.
and because the sand's flat, there would be the sandstone block still there.
Yes. I mean, we understand the point you're making, that the Heritage Report has looked at Commonwealth records, but of course the Commonwealth didn't exist in the time period you're talking about, and you're saying they should look at state records as well. So we understand that point. So
Right. Okay, these are World War II fortifications.
Mhm.
I did take some planning staff with me and showed them, although they don't exist at the moment, I showed them the actual concrete on the site with concrete blocks.
Right.
And again, that would be foundations. There's also a mention in the National Archives Index of a lease being granted to a war establishment on that site, and that does not appear in the Heritage Report.
Right. I will have to ask you to wrap up very quickly, but let me point out again that this is a matter at very preliminary stages.
Yes, it is.
The applicant is here and will address it shortly.
But I would think that the Heritage Report should be made more complete before it goes to DA stage.
That's my point. So you might, in fact, have a chat with the fellow afterwards and provide the information you've thankfully provided to us, so that they can, in fact, address your concerns and make sure it's covered in the formal application. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eddie Swat, is it?
It is, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel members. Before I commence, could I introduce some technical advisors from Urbis? I've brought along Ashley Persian, Andrew Crisp and Naomi Daly. I'm hoping that you could consider a little bit of extra time so we can address the public's concerns about the heritage more directly. A couple of extra minutes would be terrific. No?
I'm happy to give you a few extra minutes, particularly on that aspect.
Yeah.
If you focus on...
I'll try and complete mine earlier so we have a little bit more time for heritage. So essentially, for many years I was manager development at Taronga Zoo, and I'll get to that a little bit later on, but you can maybe try and simulate the similarities between the sites, being foreshore sites. The Southern Metropolitan Cemeteries, New South Wales, it's important to note we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we play a very important part in keeping burial costs down because of the private sector competition. So keep that in mind, please, when we're considering this proposal.
Is it a Crown authority?
It is a Crown authority, but we're still categorised not-for-profit. It's contentious whether we're regulated or not, but we're still not-for-profit at this stage.
Thank you.
There's a lot of news at the moment about the cruise ship terminal. I want the people that are concerned about our development to consider some of the other options that site might be used for by the state government should the cruise ship terminal get the green light, and it's still hot as a topic for the area. The context strategically for our operation is obviously affordable and sustainable burial. The Metropolitan Cemeteries or the Sydney Cemetery Capacity Report from 2017 identifies a critical supply and demand issue for all the residents of Sydney, but more so closer to the CBD now. Waverley is essentially full. They've got some reuse projects there, which again, it's a limited land supply, but we're facing the same land shortages for Eastern Suburbs Memorial Park. So this is the only remaining land available for us to expand into. The importance of not generating new cemeteries, I'm trying to impress on the opposition that, you know, the expansion makes sense from an operational point of view, and to consider that, because duplicating cemeteries is certainly not the sustainable way to go. So there's a natural expansion into Bumbra Point. So the proposal is obviously it's a zoned RE1 public recreation. We don't suggest that we would change that zoning, but we are asking that an additional use be allowed for that zoned area. There's a 20-metre buffer coastal zone. Now this is some of the, set 56, Harbour Foreshore, important urban considerations for coastal areas and their development, like Taronga Zoo. Gee, that went quickly.
It does, yes.
At the moment, it's scrub and weed infested. We're proposing 3,000 burial interments. There's a very important deed of agreement with the Aboriginal people that will allow the people to be reinterred to their own land. I think I'm just going to cut here now and hand over to the people that know about heritage.
Thank you. We will, if there's questions, I'll ask you.
Thank you, panel. Ashley Persian, Senior Heritage Consultant with Urbis. You have all of our information and our updated reports with you, so I won't go through all of the detail. I will just say that in good faith, our proponent has undertaken extensive additional research to address all the concerns that have been raised by the council and by members of the community so far throughout this process. We have undertaken some preliminary archaeological investigations on the site to make sure that we are addressing any potential archaeological concerns as they are uncovered. To date, we have not uncovered any information which has substantiated any of the records that we've been provided so far, and nothing in the historical record has substantiated the claim that there are significant structures built on the site for its former defence use. I will just point out that the site was indeed reserved for a military purpose, a battery reserve, in 1886. This reserve was then later relinquished in the 1960s when it was deemed that that use had failed. The site was never used for an extensive period of time for this use. It was used primarily for the inlet tunnel for the Bungarong Power Station, which was developed to the north of the site, and we do consider that the site has significance for this remnant structure. We've done a lot of investigations to date, and we are confident that the planning proposal will not detrimentally affect the heritage significance of the place. We're very confident that anything can be addressed through conditions of consent for heritage interpretation or archival recording, which our proponent is very willing to undertake, or through further investigations such as a site-specific DCP and conditions of consent as you see fit. We have the council's support. They're pretty confident that we've addressed all of the concerns that have been raised to date. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions of either speaker?
I just want to ask about the proposed zoning. I'm not sure if maybe Mr. Swat should answer that.
Zoning, we've got our planner here,
Oh, the
and
planner?
we've got our
Yeah.
proponent as well.
I'm just not, it's not clear in my mind why it wouldn't be proposed to zone it SP, Special Uses Cemetery. And I appreciate that you're saying it'll still be available for the public to use in, but really it's not a public recreation facility in the way that other parks in the municipality or the local government area would be. Why isn't it proposed to be zoned as special uses?
Yep, and forgive me, I earlier in the piece, I don't know, I've come into this project a little bit later, but I think it is largely because of maintaining that public access and foreshore sort of enhancement and walkway was, I think, the big driver for retaining it. And I think in consultation with council, that was a recommendation, I believe.
I'll also just say, sorry, Naomi, in the 1960s when the battery reserve use was relinquished, it was relinquished with the purpose of a public recreation. So it's just a continuation of that use.
Is it really a public recreational use?
I mean, I think I take your point that the majority of that land will be for cemetery purpose, holus bolus. Yes, the 20 metres at the sort of the foreshore and walkways throughout would be the only, I guess, public access through it. But I guess we're not objecting at all to it being rezoned, I don't think, in terms of the cemetery use into a cemetery. But yeah, that was I guess the historical discussions that have occurred today to just maintain it being of, I guess, for public purpose, and largely because of the public Crown land arrangement as well. Yeah.
I think if you look at where the car park is at the moment, and there's quite large easements across the site. If you look at the density of what will be there, it'll be a lawn cemetery. It will look quite open and parklandish compared to a monumental cemetery.
Yeah.
And so it connects then from the car park through the lawn cemetery to quite a vegetated coastal walking track. So it seems more like a park than a cemetery in the design.
But for a land use purpose, it is, yeah, the majority is cemetery.
I had a similar question. It's along that same planning land use perspective. Did you provide an analysis in your planning proposal about the recreation space that is being lost and therefore needs to be replaced somewhere? Did you consider that land use options type?
No, I think it was because it looked at the quality of that public space that is there now, and it is sort of quite a weeded, not well utilised sort of area, and very ad hoc, unsafe pathways that occur there for the public purpose now. So I don't think there was, I guess it was driven largely by the demand for the cemetery. As opposed to the flip way around. Yep.
So do you have data on the actual use, recreation use of that land?
Not data in terms of usability or
in terms of use.
Actual use currently now? I don't believe we do. Yeah.
I think is locked daily, so the access to that area is quite restricted at the moment. There is a pathway. There's a lot of walkers using the pathway between the cemetery and that land.
It's probably ad hoc. There's not been a thorough research or assessment of that. No.
Thank you. That's all I had.
I had a question. I'm not sure if you're able to answer it, but there seems to be some discrepancy between the area identified for coastal erosion and the concept master plan, in as much as part of the road and part of the cemetery, in fact, would appear to extend into that land identified. So,
the early proposal had a narrower setback, and we
yes.
do another coastal erosion study to look at the effects of 1 in 100 year wave activity, and that
yes.
pushed the line back, so you may have 2 generations of the document.
I suspect we do, but I mean the question is, therefore, or that arises from that is all of the roadway and cemetery facilities outside the coastal erosion zone? Right. Secondly, the council, as I understand it, is suggesting that the public foreshore walkway should also be outside that zone. So is it proposed to accommodate that outside that zone and therefore not part of the cemetery? And that would reflect the different boundaries of land use under the planning proposal.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the additional permitted uses map, there's actually a distinction.
That's where there seems to be a confusion.
Yeah, that's where your confusion lies. Okay. Yeah, right.
They don't correspond.
How they don't marry up. Okay.
Yeah. But the intention is they would marry up.
The intention is that they should marry up. Yes.
And the foreshore pathway, the public pathway, would be outside both. In other words, outside the coastal protection area and not within the cemetery land.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously the site-specific DCP would, I know this is for the planning proposal purpose, but I guess if there's any work about massaging those edges, then we can, that can be undertaken in the site-specific DCP as well in terms of that. Yeah.
So can I just follow up on that? So the area that's going to be the public pathway for people to still use it for walking or taking their dogs or whatever, that will be not in the pink area. That's a special use area. That's the additional use area.
Yep, it's outside that.
Outside.
Yeah.
So is it correct that the latest information shows the foreshore buffer zone as 20 metres, and that is the same as the coastal erosion zone? Is that correct?
They should be, yes.
Okay, so 20 metres is the latest, but it does show, it doesn't marry up at this point on the map. Yep.
It doesn't with the earlier maps, no.
Well, the latest map that we have shows the foreshore buffer zone as 20 metres, but it does seem that parts of the cemetery use and parts of the walkway use come and go in that zone.
How is number of points spelled on that drawing?
Is that right?
Does it have an H on the end?
No, it does not.
It's the earlier one.
It's the earlier one.
Ah, so this is earlier. So the H makes the difference.
Certainly does.
Earlier version. Okay, beautiful.
All right.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, can I thank you, but could I ask that you might take the opportunity to chat with Mr. Abella about the heritage aspect? So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, the other thing is, can you ensure that the staff have your names for the record? So we've now heard from all of the registered speakers. So in accordance with the panel guidelines adopted in December last year, the public meeting will now be closed and the panel will move to another room to deliberate on and vote on the matters. The panel won't return to the chambers today. The outcome of the voting and the determination will be made available through the council's website either late tonight or tomorrow. That's on the determinative matters. I'm not sure they'll publish necessarily the planning proposal matter. And an audio recording of the public meeting will also be available through the council website. Can I thank everybody for their attendance and for their input? And can I thank the council staff for their assistance so far? Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.